Chasing Giants with Don Higgins and Terry Peer. Brought to you by Osseo Camo, nature's most lethal camouflage. Follow along as Don and Terry discuss the techniques, strategies, and dedication needed to harvest one of God's most amazing creations, world-class whitetails.
Well, welcome everyone to the Chasing Giants podcast. It is September 22nd, 2024 with Don Higgins. I'm Terry Peer. We're brought to you by our friends at Osseo Gear. And Don, we're closing in on the start of your season. We got Kentucky that's open, a couple big bucks we talked about last week, like Brandon Epperson. You know, it's that time of year that we've worked so hard for all this off season. We've talked about it till we're blue in the face, and we're right about here. But we got some things to talk about. But I mean, the farting church, as I like to always call it, man, this EHD's got us worried, doesn't it?
That's the big question mark. I was getting reports every day, and I didn't get any today, but we had a real good rain move through the area yesterday afternoon, evening. Actually, there was places that got a rain yesterday morning as well, and we got 1 inch and 2/10 here. There was places that got up to 3 or 4 inches not far from me. Dwayne Hopkins got a little over 2 inches at his place, and he's only maybe 3 miles from me. Hopefully that helps. I'm a little bit worried because my number one target buck, as well as another buck or two, I've not seen on camera in probably 10 days to 2 weeks. So I've been paying attention when I'm outside, seeing if I can smell anything. I don't want to go stomping through my sanctuaries or anything, but I am real conscious of wind direction and trying to smell anything, and I have not to this point. So I've been checking cameras on other properties and looking and have not found a single dead deer, but who knows?
Does your nightly drives around the countryside now look for buzzards as well as deer standing in the bean fields?
Well, I've been so busy, I haven't even been doing that lately. I got to slow down next summer. I say that every summer, but I love going out and watching those velvet bucks come out into a bean field or an alfalfa field. And this summer, I think I went out maybe twice and got to do that. And otherwise, I was all over the place. And shoot, we're still busy as could be. Yesterday, Dwayne and I drove to Missouri and had 2 different meetings. Had one meeting with a company that's really becoming prominent in the ag industry about carrying some of their products, and that went very well. Really good Christian company. Then we went and visited with a soybean breeder, and Dwayne and I were in a soybean patch that had 3,000 different varieties of soybeans in it. So, we're never resting on our past success. We're always looking to get better. And, we're looking ahead to the Generation 3 soybean from Real World. And that's not anything that's going to happen in the next couple of years. The soybean breeder is whittling down these 3,000 varieties to probably about 300 or so next year. And we'll make larger plantings of each of those and get a better idea of, the group number they're going to be, their maturity. But, I don't want to share too much about his breeding program, but it's definitely different than anything that's out there right now. And so, I mean, there's things like that we're doing I'm doing all the time, and so is Dwayne and everybody at Real World looking at different opportunities like that. And I'm going to have to slow down a little bit and spend more time in the deer woods.
Keep saying that every single summer, and then we end up looking at buying another company or making a new product, but I mean, at the end of the day, we've been very blessed, and we can't take credit away from how the Lord's blessed us and our families and brought a lot of people that support us together, and we're very grateful for that. But yeah, it's I think we're definitely at the point now where our hobby or our love and passion and working inside of it's kind of like the guy who owns the bow shop that never gets to hunt. His passion for archery then ends up he's fixing everybody's bows instead of hunting. But I think I got a feeling you're still going to get it done this year. I don't doubt that.
Well, I'd feel a whole lot better if I'd get a picture of my target buck. My hope is that I get a picture this week. I'm going to check some cameras, right ahead of season. When we record next weekend, we're going to be just right ahead of the October 1 opener. And I'm hoping that next episode I can show pictures of my target buck and also reveal the name that I have for that buck. And I think it's a very unique name, and the whole plan to hunt that buck is very unique, something I've never done before. So kind of anxious to share that story.
Yeah, but the, like I said when we started this episode off, the anxiety, I haven't gotten a picture of a decent buck in Illinois on one of the properties in almost 3 weeks. And that was the property that, we could definitely smell something dead. And, just that anxiety sitting there eating away at us, not knowing when that's where our target buck's at. It's, the rain's going to help, but that first frost can't get here soon enough. I can tell people that, but.
Right.
So you got rain coming in. I ran over to the farm this afternoon. Our rain is going to be here Saturday or Sunday evening through, I think, chance through Thursday on and off. And we talked about how the overbrowse problem I had on my soybeans, you had the same thing. And I went over there today, and what standing beans is still there. And, of course, we had drilled my fall plots in, but I just absolutely covered my soybean plots with some real world forage oats, and hopefully right before this rain. And my only hope there is that might end up being the only thing that I have in late season, and try to get that green carpet coming up as best I can.
Yeah, I had a drone show up here about a week, 10 days ago, and flew over my NutriCrave corn plots and spread seed over that, to overseed it. And then I went in this afternoon. We just got 1 2/10 inches, yesterday evening, and I waited till mid-afternoon, and it was dry enough that I could go in there with my mower on the front of my skid loader, and I mowed part of my corn, basically about 2 passes around the edge of my corn plots, and put some corn on the ground, but also get some sunlight to that seed that was broadcast. And I'm feeling better about the amount of food I'm going to have on my farm this winter, because one of my neighbors told me that a field that joins right up to me is going to be in winter wheat. So there's going to be at least 50 acres of winter wheat that joins right up to me. So that'll keep the deer well fed. And even if I run out in my plots, that wheat field is going to keep those deer home and well fed. So things are looking better on that end, especially with this rain that we're getting.
Well, our alfalfa is just completely torched. I mean, it is brown as brown can be. The farmers got probably their last cut off of it. I can't see them getting, and I mean, unless we just come back with a lot of rain and that stuff rebounds and we stay warm into late October down here, I can't see them getting another cut off of it, but it just absolutely torched it. So, I mean, you look out across the ridges here in Kentucky where I live, there's nothing green. It is all brown and yellow. Everything is down. And, for the people that listen to the podcast know that I was in Chicago for a week and then was home last week. I filled 2 high capacity feeders before I left. So between Austin Razor's prototype, the coonless feeder, and a redneck 750 pound, there was right at 2,000 pounds of feed. Those deer went through all of that feed in less than 2 weeks. And I mean, there just is not anything to eat. So while you're a little bit relieved of your food for late season, I'm a little worried, but at least we can feed here. So we'll keep them fed somehow.
Are you happy with that feeder?
Yeah, so far, I have not. I'm running 2 different cameras on it, and I have not gotten a raccoon to get up anywhere close to it yet. So now mine's a prototype. It's got some small changes that are going to be done for production model, but so far the goal of it is, the main goal is to keep coons out of it. The second goal is to keep those velvet racks away from frame, out of way so we don't damage any racks, and it's done phenomenal at those. So far, so good.
I was texting with Austin this morning, and me and my business partners bought another 383 acre property in Ohio, and as soon as Austin gets his first shipment in, he's taking 4 of them and putting them up for us on that new property and filling them. So we'll get a chance to test them out too.
Yep. All right, well, let's take a quick break and listen to a spot from Osseo. But before we do, how about we share the good news from the prodigy Wes Delks? We got a text from him at 4:59 today. Him and his lovely bride Madison welcome to Wilbert Albert Crockett Delks. That's four names for those people who are talking. Their second child, a little boy, was born, and 8 pounds 10 ounces. Everyone is doing fantastic. And Wes listens to the podcast every week. He's such a good guy and such a great friend to both of us. Those of you who are watching on YouTube, leave a little comment if you don't mind down below. I'm wishing them congratulations. So William Albert Crockett Delks, 8 pounds 10 ounces, healthy baby boy. Praise the Lord.
Yeah, the Delks give me hope for the next generation. They are just top-notch people, and those kids they don't understand how blessed they really are to have the parents that they got. And I told both of my grandsons recently, my older 2 grandsons, that they have no idea how good of parents they've got. That there's a lot of kids that don't have one parent as good as they've got the 2, so they should be grateful.
Well, let's take this quick break. We'll be back to talk about the Chasing Giants TV first week release and a couple other things before we answer some questions from this week's listeners. We'll be right back.
Osseo Gear has perfected one of the most innovative camo patterns on the market. The unique camo pattern designed to mimic the feather patterns of one of North America's greatest predators, the great horned owl. Combined with intuitive features, superior comfort, and ultra high quality fabrics, give bow hunters the ultimate advantage. Osseo has outfitted over 10,000 bow hunters across the country with over 1,000 5-star reviews. Visit asiogear.com to check it out for yourself. Use code CHASINGGIANTS for 15% off.
Don, I was just thinking, you gave Wes the name Prodigy. It's only fitting that we have to come up with a nickname for his 2 kids now. You know that, right? We got to think about that one.
Well, I think it's Boone and Crockett. I think the ones.
Yeah, that's their names. But the Prodigy's 2 boys will be nicknamed Boone and Crockett.
Yep.
Surprised Madison let him do that.
Well, Wes was just bragging to me about what a great wife he's got the other day. I had lunch with him. Must have been last week, I guess, one day. And, she lets him chase his dreams just like Robin lets me chase mine and has for decades. And it's made a world of difference in both of our lives, really, because I could have never, started the businesses and done the things that I've done without her supporting me 100%. So,
yep.
Nothing like a good wife.
Yep. Well, I want to talk about Chasing Giants TV for a little bit, and then I'm going to put you on the spot with a topic that I didn't warn you about. But for those who didn't know, last Sunday, a week ago from when this is airing, our first video from Joe Miles' Kentucky hunt from last year aired, and we've been releasing short videos every day. And we really appreciate the positive feedback everybody's given us. We're releasing these on YouTube and then all of our social media accounts. I actually swallowed my pride a little bit. I am not a fan of TikTok, but we have a TikTok page and then Facebook and Instagram. But this first week, it's really starting to show the diversity we've talked about all summer with this show. And just the short reels of all these different people and their perspective, the style of their hunt. That's what I'm most excited about this show, because literally there's something for everybody and every style of hunter out there.
Yeah, and the continual content is one of the big things. Every day, the one video you may see, it's only 2 minutes long, and another one may be 20 minutes long. We're not going to make them too long because we know people's attention span is not that long, but we want to have something every single day. And there's obviously going to be some days, Sundays or whatever, where we miss occasionally, but it's going to be continual content. I would encourage everybody, if you're on social media, please go to Facebook and Instagram and follow the Chasing Giants TV pages.
Yep. Yeah, so like one day there was Brandon Epperson talking about, Brandon's like 6'4", 6'5", and a big boy. He's talking about having to hunt early season. And then you got Ty Miller, who's talking about how his small properties that he hunts just leave zero room for mistakes. Every little detail matters. And then I got to watch Bobby Worthington's first one today, and what he put together on just an interesting spin of big woods hunting. And then there's public stuff that's going to happen. And Josh Anderson recorded from Kansas yesterday. And of course, you and Joe and Wes and Brian Kraft and Chris Yates and James Hayden from Real World is going to help us. Dan Pfeiffer from Lester's Feet's helping us. So it's a mix and match of so many different styles of hunting and people at different points of their journey. And I said it once very early that this is a show that our content that's going to be continually out there that relates to everyone in some degree, but it also puts people to what they aspire to be. Because there's going to be people that Brandon's wanting to shoot, I think, 4 different states, a buck over 140, and you and Joe have completely different goals between the two of you, and I just think it's cool that we're bringing in such this diverse group of people that's going to put all this content together.
Yeah, it's going to really be interesting once season opens for the rest of us. I mean, season's open in Kentucky and South Carolina where Joe's at, but there's several of us in the group that have not started hunting yet because our seasons aren't open. But once seasons are open, it's that content, is going to be real-time content. A lot of it's going to be filmed, right out in the field and maybe from a tree stand or a blind even, and then shown on our platform within 24 hours. So real-time in the real world.
Yeah, I'm really excited about it. So make sure you go watch that. And yeah, next week I'm really interested to see if we can get a picture of this buck when you do your trail camera pull, because I hope that buck's still walking, just so we can share the story of what you're going to try to put together for this buck this year. I think it's pretty creative, but also it's going to be something you haven't done before. So excited about that. This isn't really tied specifically to deer hunting, but I want you to tell a story here. And it's more of like a proud grandpa moment for you that I want you to share, just because I thought it was a cool story. And people will just have to be patient with us, that this really doesn't have to do with necessarily hunting, but it's being the person that we all want to be. Talk about this cow situation with your grandson. I just think it's a super cool story.
Well, I've got 3 grandsons now, and you just mentioned before we started recording that the way I reacted to a situation this week is quite a bit different than I would have probably reacted 4 or 5 years ago. And you're absolutely right. Today, when things happen, I think about my grandsons, and I think about if they were right beside me as I'm reacting to a situation. So, the legacy that I'm leaving for those kids is very important to me. And my middle grandson, Walker, is the one that has the most interest in the outdoors, animals, livestock, and such. And when he's here staying with us, he wants to help feed the cows all the time. And, they live on 40 acres and they've got some pasture and a barn and such. So Corey and Andrea spent some time this summer getting fences fixed and fixing up a place for Walker to have a couple cows. So I had 2 older cows that were really tame, at least tame for me. I can walk right out in the middle of pasture and totally walk around those cows, and I can pet them from their head to their tail, and they just stand there. And they were a little bit, when Walker would be with me, they were a little bit skittish around him because he's little or whatever. They wasn't sure what to think of him. And they got a small corral area behind their barn where they was going to put these cows, and I thought, well, get those cows in that small corral area and get Walker in there, feeding them every day, and they'll get used to him. And well, it didn't work out too well. There was one of those cows that was just a little bit ornery because he was feeding them a little bit of grain, to tame them down, and she'd see that feed bucket and she'd charge him and everything else. And he was telling his dad that, she was charging him, and she actually threw him up against the fence once and Corey didn't believe it. Then he's seen it for himself a couple times. And Walker would even be outside the pen, and that cow would like charge at the fence where he was at. I thought, this ain't gonna work. He's got no business with 1,500-pound cows that don't like him. So I went to the sale barn this week, and I told him that I'm gonna go find some calves, some young calves, and I'll trade him out the 2 cows I brought and leave him some calves, a couple calves. Well, I go to the sale barn, and this particular sale barn, there's a catwalk up above all the pens that hold the different cattle and such. And I go up there first. I look down, and there's a pen with 3 little shorthorn calves in it. And I say little, they're probably 450 pounds. And those are the ones that caught my eye because, in my experience, the shorthorn breed is very docile. There can be docile cattle of any breed, but, overall, the shorthorn is really docile. So I couldn't tell from up above if they were steers or heifers or what. I go down and get in the pen with them because I wanted to see how tame. If they was running to the other end of the pen and, trying to get away from me, I wasn't going to buy them. But I go down there and I open the gate and I get in the pen with them. And first thing I notice, they're all heifers, which is what we wanted. And then, they're coming up to me and they're licking on me and smelling on me, and they're not running whatsoever. They're tame as it could be. So at that point, I knew I was going to buy them. It didn't matter what they cost. I was buying them. Those were the perfect calves for Walker, and I just couldn't believe how it felt. I happened to be there the day these perfect calves were there and showed up for sale. So I ended up buying them, and then I go to load them up, and the guy that's helping me load them is a local guy and that works at the sale barn, and I told him the calves that I'd bought. I had the paper, the loadout ticket, and he says, "Oh, I know the ones you mean." He says, "I'll be right back with them," and he says, "You want the backstory on these calves?" And I said, "Yeah," and he said, "They're crazy as can be." And I kind of looked at him like, "No, they're not. I was just in the pen with them. They're not crazy at all." And he laughed. He says, "No." He says, they were brought in by a family that raises purebred shorthorns, and that family has a son with Down syndrome. And when they unloaded those calves, they all had halters on, and this boy with Down syndrome walked those calves in to the sale barn to sell them, and then took the halters off, and left. Well, when he told me that, I was just smiling from ear to ear because I knew Walker would eat that up. So loaded them up, drove straight to Indiana, and unloaded those calves at his place and loaded up the cows. And we were patting them as they was coming off the trailer. I mean, just dog tame. Well, Andrea, as soon as she heard that this boy that sold them had halters on him, she instantly gets on the internet and she orders 3 halters. Well, the very day those halters came in, which was just a day or two after I delivered those calves, Walker goes out there and he gets the halters on all 3 of them, and he's walking them calves around just smiling from ear to ear. And I'm guessing that's going to be the start of a cow herd. I'm guessing probably every heifer calf that's born, Walker's probably not going to let them get rid of them. He's going to build his herd with them. But I just thought it was amazing the way everything fell into place. It's like I could see God's hand in that, because to find 3 shorthorn calves, heifer calves, that are already halter broke, I mean, the odds of that is just plumb ridiculous at a sale barn. Yep. And yet there they were on the day that I happened to be there, because I don't go to the sale barn every week or anything. And, some people might scoff at the idea that God had a hand in it, but I'm telling you, I could see his hand all over it.
Well, for people like us that take heat for talking about our religion or using our faith in all aspects of our businesses, it goes back to one simple principle you talked about many years ago, and that is, what is it? It's not seeing is believing, believing is seeing. And yep. for those people who are an undoubtable believer, know exactly what we're talking about. And people can be critical of that and do what they want, but that's the foundation of everything that we do, including this podcast. And I have no doubt that a bigger hand and a bigger smile was upstairs looking down on making that all work out for you and your grandson. So take a quick minute. I know we haven't talked about it here recently, but I know we get a lot of questions, and it might just be easier to give an update on Andrea. And we'll obviously ask people to continue to keep her in your prayers.
Yeah, so Andrea went in for a scan on Tuesday. It was actually the day I bought those calves. And she sent us the report from that scan, and I couldn't make, logic out of that gibberish at the medical talk, and I said, is this good or bad? And she said, well, I go in on Thursday. I got a doctor's appointment on Thursday. The doctor is going to tell me if it's good or bad. Thursday she calls, and the report was good. There was nothing to be concerned about. They told her that if you want another scan in 6 months, we can. You don't have to. Feel real good about it. The one issue potentially is one of the drugs that she's taking causes demineralization of the bones, and she's got to go in this coming week for a bone scan to see if that drug is affecting her bones. If it is, they're going to have to switch drugs there. A good report overall. Praise the Lord and give him all the credit, and just appreciate everyone that's been praying. It's been a year now. It was the end of August last year when we got the news, so it's been just a little over a year. And everywhere I go, there's hardly a day goes by that I don't get a text or something from somebody asking about her. Just this morning I got one from Bobby Worthington asking how the scan went, and multiple other people. So I just want to thank everyone from the bottom of my heart for all your prayers. Much appreciated. That's what it's all about.
Yep.
Ever had a terrible real estate experience? Average realtors usually spend more time selling themselves than on selling your land. They'll tell you anything to get the listing. They know that if they get the listing, you're stuck with them. Not here. Midwest Land Group has changed the way land is sold and is the only brokerage to offer a 100% satisfaction guarantee. That means if we don't meet your expectations, you can fire us. That puts all the pressure on us to perform. We don't just list land, we sell it. If you're looking to buy or sell property, don't before you talk to us. Visit us at MidwestLandGroup.com.
The first one comes from Dwayne Miller from New Paris, Indiana. It says, Don and Terry, love the podcast and listen every Monday. Keep it going. My question, so the way I'm hearing Oklahoma is passing or has passed regulation that allows the release of certain captive deer, supposedly for genes to combat CWD. What are the odds that Boone and Crockett or Pope and Young will eventually no longer recognize deer taken from that state if someone would take a 400-inch buck, which is not that uncommon in captive deer, but far larger than any wild deer? Well, Dwayne, that is a great question. I don't know what Pope and Young or Boone and Crockett's going to do. I suppose there's probably going to be some rule changes as far as deer that qualify. I think the thing to keep in mind, though, is it's not like there's going to be 300 and 400-inch bucks just turning up right and left in Oklahoma. As those deer breed with the wild deer and cross, those genes are going to become diluted. And yeah, there's going to be some giants, but it's not like it's going to be, every property is going to have a 200-inch buck even. So I don't think it's going to have as big an impact as some people might think, but it definitely will have an impact. And the other thing is people get the idea that every captive deer is a huge antlered deer. And that's just not the case. There's plenty of captive deer that have antlers that are no better than wild deer. And what they're going to be looking at is not the antlers on these deer. They're going to be looking at the gene. That gene, I forget what gene it is. There's a gene that makes those deer, I hate to use the word immune, but less susceptible, put it that way, less susceptible to CWD. And it's that gene they're going to be looking at as they look for deer to release. And so it's not going to have anything to do with big antlers, although the deer could have big antlers and have that gene. So, I do expect it will change the state of Oklahoma to some degree. But you got to remember how many wild deer are in the state of Oklahoma. And let's say there's 100,000, and I'm guessing there's probably a lot more than that. But let's say there's 100,000, and let's say they turn loose 1,000, and I'm going to guess they probably won't be turning loose 1,000. That's only 1% of the population.
Yep.
So it's going to be interesting. I do applaud Oklahoma for taking this approach instead of falling in line with the
killing everything.
The sky is falling nonsense. Let's eradicate deer whenever we find CWD. At least Oklahoma's thinking outside of the box, because let's face it, there's states like Illinois and Wisconsin and such that have had these eradication programs for decades now, and it's not stopping CWD whatsoever. It may slow it down, maybe. Who knows? But at least Oklahoma is taking a common sense approach to addressing the whole situation.
Yeah, the whole thing is this thing called a prion can live in the soil for who knows how many years, and we kill all the deer, the prion's still there for whenever the next deer comes. It makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. So yeah, it's a different approach, and we'll see what comes of it. But yeah, I think just like other rules that DNR's come up with, I think organizations will probably adapt as they go on. What they do, who knows? But I mean, as technology moves forward, as all of these methods from the DNRs happen, I think organizations like Pope and Young and Boone and Crockett will probably change their rules a little bit. It wouldn't surprise me one bit.
Yep.
Before we put up the next question, I meant to announce this earlier. We are going to start releasing a lot of new apparel very soon, and I hope within the next week or two, they'll be up on the Chasing Giants Higgins Outdoors website, and then also our partner that's going to be doing it both from Chasing Giants, but also Lester's Feet. So all of you people who have been asking for Lester's Feet apparel, all the proceeds from that will obviously go back to the foundation, and then we'll have a bunch of Chasing Giants stuff on there. So make sure you stay tuned for that, and I'll put the next question up on the board for you.
All right, this one comes from Dave Least from Antioch, Illinois. It says, "Hello, Don and Terry. Love the podcast. Hoping you can finally put to rest a difference of opinion my hunting buddies and myself have regarding shooting doe. Is it better to shoot them early before they're bred? Some of us believe we shouldn't shoot them after the rut because some of them are likely carrying fawns from some of the top bucks in the area. Some, myself included, feel it doesn't matter when we shoot them. Hope you guys can finally end the debate. Thanks for your time and keep up the great work." Well, Dave, you are right and you are wrong. So it doesn't matter from a standpoint of if they're bred or not, whether you shoot them early before they're bred or late after they're bred. But as a land manager, it's better to shoot them early because they have not consumed as much food. At the end of the fall or at the fall, there's a limited amount of food on the landscape. And, once the deer consume that, then they go on in survival mode, eating secondary foods. So you shoot a doe early, and she's no longer consuming food that's available. The other thing is, if you shoot that doe before the rut, bucks are not chasing her around, burning up energy to chase and breed that doe. But when it comes right down to it, you shoot them when you get the chance. If we can all have a management plan for our property where we're going to go out and shoot X number of does before the rut, that doesn't mean we're going to get it done. Most of the time, we don't. Myself, on my property, it's more important where I shoot them instead of when I shoot them. And I want to shoot them from stand locations that are going to have a minimal impact on the property. And that's the biggest thing for me.
This sounds really bad and people will laugh at me, but many, many years ago, we shot a doe in January. And when I went to field dress it, I saw the fetus. And I said I was never going to shoot another one in late season again. I don't know if it was because of the thought of abortion or whatever, but I don't know. I'm not holding it against anybody who does, but I just remember how hard that hit me very early in my hunting career. And I haven't shot a doe in late season since, but I don't know. It's just me being silly, I guess. But I took it really hard when I saw the fetus when I got the doe.
Well, that just shows you've got a heart and you've got compassion for the animal. So
yeah,
I don't see anything wrong with that at all.
I mean, you shoot them early, they're not going to breed. You're still not going to have the fawn on your property regardless. But yeah,
Right.
I don't know why. I just took it really, really hard. I was very early in my hunting career and just never have done it since. So, but we'll get the next question up here. This is a long one.
This comes from our buddy Ray Miller from Burton, Ohio. Says,
Ray.
Hi, Don and Terry. Thanks for all you do. So in the last few years, I've noticed a trend with mature bucks. I have never heard anyone talk about it, and if the right situation arises, I have plans of using it against a buck in the future, and this only applies to low-pressure farms with great sanctuaries. I have noticed is if there is a disturbance on the edge of the sanctuary during the middle part of the day that is out of the ordinary, and a mature buck can hear it from his bed, he will come and investigate it within the next 8 hours, and many times in the daylight soon after getting up from his bed that night. Again, it's only on low-pressured farms. I'm referring to loud equipment, for example. We had a tree blow over our steps to one of our blinds on the backside of a 43-acre clear-cut sanctuary and had to drive around it with a tractor to replace them. So it was something different and out of the ordinary, and a few hours later, after everything dies down, boom, there he is sniffing around in broad daylight. This is where we mow clover repeatedly around this sanctuary and always mow with the same routine, and he will ignore this because that isn't out of his routine. I have noticed this on numerous similar situations in past years to the point where I have plans of keeping this trick in my back pocket for a stubborn old nocturnal brute someday, and it has always been with heavy, loud equipment, tractor, dozers, or excavators. So my question is, have you guys ever witnessed this, and am I losing my head for even considering this as a tactic? Don, if I remember correctly, this may have happened with your first 200 when you went in to install a tree stand with your truck and had the radio blaring just to have him 20 yards later that night. Thank you and God bless. Well, Ray, you're a thinker, and boy, you got me to thinking with that question, and you know you might be onto something. You mentioned that too with my first 200, and so those who haven't heard the story, now those who have been to my master class, we go right to the tree where this happened, and I tell the story there. But so I'd seen this buck for the first time the evening before, and the wind, and I only had one stand on that property at the time, and the wind switched the next day, and I needed to get another stand in for different wind directions. And I went in midday, drove my truck across the field right to the tree that was on the edge, and I left the truck running. I had my windows down. I had the radio up about as loud as it'd go. I had a friend with me that owned the property, and him and I got out and left the truck running, left the radio blaring, and we put a ladder stand up and just trimmed a couple branches for shooting lanes. We didn't go overboard because we didn't want to mess things up too much. Got done, got in my truck. We went to town, had lunch, and I came back about 2 or 3 hours later for the evening hunt. And I'd only been in that stand probably 20 minutes or so, and that 200-inch buck was 20 yards from that stand. He was in thick brush where I couldn't get an arrow through, so all I could do was watch. But that buck definitely came to within 20 yards of where that disturbance had been just a few hours earlier. And I can think of other situations. In fact, just today, I went out and I'd overseeded my corn. I think I talked about that earlier with the drone. And I went in this afternoon and I mowed some of that corn down, not all of it, but some of it, on my skid loader, with the mower in the front. And as soon as I got done, I put a couple of trail cameras right on that new mowed corn. And I'm going to be interested to go back and check those cameras and see if there's a big buck on those cameras the evening after I did that mowing. So I think you might be onto something, to be honest. I've tried to think back to other situations, and I can think of times where, I was out midday doing something. Maybe I'm on a four-wheeler or side-by-side, and I slipped back in for the evening hunt, place where I'd been, and boom, I see a good buck. So you may be onto something, and I got to hand it to you for thinking about this. This is outside the box, and these are the kind of questions that's really easy for me to choose because it's something I've never heard talked about, and a good job on the question. But I'm definitely going to be keeping an eye on things and may have to put that trick in my arsenal as well.
Well, I think back to those times that we went to eat at the buffet with those guys, and we would see a disturbance at the food buffet. and it was a race to see who could get over there next to them little mini corn cobs. Remember all them little mini corn cobs on the buffet line? So I don't know if it applies to deer there, Ray, but I know when they hit it on the buffet bar at the restaurant and there was a disturbance there, you know, me and you went and checked it out. I can tell you that.
Well, Ray and Aiden, they cause a disturbance wherever they go. Let's just put it that way.
Shoot. They were planting trees today. Was that today or yesterday they were planting trees?
I think it was today.
I think it was today. Yeah. Them guys are always working.
Well, they get it. And, you know, any success they have is not based on luck. They've figured the system out, and they're not afraid of work. And they're also not afraid to invest, you know, their time and their money into what they're doing. So they're going to kill some giants.
Yeah.
Next question comes from Andy Hendricks from Anderson, South Carolina. It says, hello, Don and Terry. If you were hunting public land and you had the option of hunting 5 different areas, how would you hunt? Assuming all the areas were relatively the same regarding hunting pressure, number of deer, etc., would you bounce around or would you focus on one and hunt it most of the time? Thanks. Keep up the great work. Well, Andy, I'm going to tell you what I would do, and it may be different than what you want to do or what a lot of other hunters would do, but if I had 5 areas to choose from, I would personally have trail cameras in all 5 areas, and I'm looking for the biggest buck I can find. And, you know, I'm not going to shy away from an area because of hunting pressure or whatever. If there's a giant there, if it's the biggest buck I know of, I'm going to go after him with only few exceptions. I'm not going to step on people's toes. In fact, I just walked away from a situation this week where I know where there is an absolute giant on public land. It's in another state. It's not in my home state of Illinois. But I seen the photo. I communicated with the site manager on that property, and he wanted to get me out there hunting, and he didn't tell me about it. I tracked him down once I heard the story, and he knew exactly where the photo came from. But I walked away from that situation because I didn't feel right about stepping on the toes of the young man who got that picture. And it just wasn't been right for me to show up, and because of the picture he got that somehow slipped out and found its way to my phone, I just didn't think it was right for me to show up, even though it was public land, and start hunting that deer right next to this young man. So there are some factors that's going to keep me from chasing a particular deer. And you're talking about public land here. The thing I'm doing is I'm looking for the biggest buck. So if all those properties were equal, I would know that on one of those properties there's a buck that's a little bit bigger than on the others, and that's where I'd be focusing my time. And the only way to do that is really with trail cameras. Now, I would be running trail cameras continually on all 5 of those properties because, you know, when the rut heats up or whatever, you could have bucks show up that you didn't realize were there. That would be my personal approach. Another hunter may give you totally different advice, but I'm looking for the biggest buck I can find.
And it also reaffirms why we are so particular about who we share pictures with from our trail cameras.
I have picked up a pattern. You know, just earlier this summer, I was out in Ohio chasing down a lead on a big buck, and I get a lot of these leads, and there is a pattern to that. And I'm not going to share the pattern until I retire from deer hunting. But there is a pattern to these pictures that show up to my phone.
Yep. That'll be in your last book, right?
There'll be a chapter on it.
All right.
The next one comes from Matt Markway from St. Louis, Missouri. He says, Don, Terry, love listening to your podcast. I have a farm in western Illinois in Brown County. I have followed many of your suggestions on my property. I have approximately, I think he's missing a number there, so many acres of corn and beans in which I harvest 70% and leave the rest for the deer. I also have clover plots and fruit trees. I always hear you talk about how beneficial mineral is to the herd. Since we can't put mineral out in Illinois, do you recommend any other suggestions to help with vitamins for my herd? Sincerely, Matt. Yeah, Matt, I'll tell you what, you absolutely need to follow this new Chasing Giants TV series, because we've been talking on this podcast for the last year or so about farming for nutrients, and how I've shifted my food plot approach to growing the most nutrient dense plants possible. And I've talked earlier on this podcast just today about Dwayne Hopkins and I were in Missouri visiting with this company that's established in the ag industry. That the products that company sells is going to help me have more nutrient dense plants in my plots, and as well as real world customers. So, living in Illinois, we can't put out anything, but we can absolutely grow plants in our plots that are more nutrient dense than even the farmers in their ag fields. So that's what I would be shooting for. You're going to need a lot of plots. You're going to need enough plots to get your deer herd through the entire winter. In Brown County, I know is a county with a lot of deer over there in the Golden Triangle, right next to Pike. A lot of deer over there, so you're probably going to need a lot of acres of plots. But you need to focus on the first of all, diversity. Every plant is going to have a different nutrient makeup. So one may be high in a certain vitamin and another one's higher in a certain mineral. A deer will balance his diet if he's given the chance. So you need diversity for all these different plants to allow him to balance his diet. Then you need to focus on growing nutrient-dense plots. And again, this new Chasing Giants TV series, video series, I'm going to be talking about that a lot in the videos, especially as we get into next spring. Actually, it'll probably start in late winter as I'm preparing to plant my plots next spring. I want to make sure that the viewer has the opportunity to do the very same thing I am. So be sharing a lot about that. But that's my advice for you as far as providing those nutrients that the deer need, since we can't do it through mineral.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing you can put out. If I understand the law correctly, there is not one thing that you can put out as supplement that's going to get that. So you have to grow it organically in the product that you're sowing. So it's really got you guys handcuffed where, people might complain and grumble about states like Kentucky or Ohio where we're allowed to feed, but that's one of the reasons that it's so beneficial for us is, we can put a lot of that through our feed program.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of the continual year-round feeding simply because it becomes baiting during hunting season.
Right.
But I do wish that Illinois had a regulation similar to Iowa or Indiana, where outside of hunting season you could supplemental feed and provide mineral.
In a pivotal time of the year when they need it.
Right. I will say, though, that I think it is way better to provide those nutrients through a naturally growing plant than through a feeder or through a pile of mineral. But those are great ways to supplement what you're doing in your plot.
Yep, absolutely. All right. Last question of the night.
This one comes from Nate Miller from West Farmington, Ohio. Says, "Hi, Don and Terry. Thanks for all you do and the great podcast. If you could be the head of any state DNR, what state would that be, and how would you go about managing it? Would you have antler point restrictions? I hunt some in PA, and they have antler point restrictions, 3 up on at least one side. My thinking is most people will shoot the first legal buck they see, thus hurting the potential for bigger bucks. What are your thoughts on this? Thanks, and have a great season." Well, Nate, obviously, if I could run any state DNR, it'd be my home state of Illinois. And as far as antler point restrictions, I'm not a big fan of those. I think that we could manage for quality without dictating what hunters shoot. And a lot of times, I know, for example, I've got pictures this summer of a couple of giant 6-point bucks. I mean, these are mature bucks that only have 6 points. Well, that buck becomes off limits if you got a 4-point restriction on one side. And that buck gets to live. The bucks that I've got on camera, I know they're at least 4 years old, and they're still 6-pointers. That buck may be protected his entire life.
Look at the 10-year-old I shot on your place. He would have never been a legal buck.
Yep. So I'm not in favor of antler point restrictions, but I am in favor of things like here in my home state of Illinois, for example. It's all about the age structure. The age structure has deteriorated because of undue pressure that we put on these deer. One of the things I would do is I would take that 2-buck limit and I would break it up. So there would be an early season that would run from October 1 till the end of the first shotgun season, which is in mid-November. And you would be allowed to shoot one early season buck and one late season buck. But before you could shoot that second buck, you would have to tag a doe. And the herd is getting out of balance just more all the time. And, EHD comes along and corrects that to some degree. But there's some management things we could do. The timing of the seasons also is another one. I would get the Illinois gun season out of November. I would move it into like the first week of December. I would not, instead of having 2 different weekends, there's a 3-day weekend in November and a 4-day weekend in December. I would give the gun hunters 9 days, give them 2 additional days, but it would all be together. So season would open on a Saturday, go through the entire next week and the next weekend and end on the following Sunday. And they're getting 2 additional days, but we would move it outside of the rut, and we would move a lot of bucks to older age classes that way as well. I would limit non-residents. Terry probably hates to hear that, but
Sure.
Right now Illinois is open to the world without limitation, and at least during the archery season, I think that needs to stop. I would do some things with the weapons. I would not eliminate any weapon. If you want to use a crossbow or whatever, I think you should be able to. I just don't think that. I think the length of the season should be dictated by the weapon you're using. But the goal would be to create regulations that are going to move more bucks into the older age classes while correcting buck-doe ratios, because that needs to be addressed on a large scale. You can't expect one property owner to correct an imbalanced buck-doe ratio, so that needs to be done on a statewide level. Get creative. As much as I bash the Illinois DNR on different topics, they've done some things fairly well. I think there's areas in the state that where maybe the herd is a little bit, there's too many deer, and there's other areas where the population's a little bit low. But I think overall they've done a pretty good job of balancing the numbers, but they've done a really poor job of balancing age structure. So in recent years, the shift has gone to a much younger deer herd. We don't have near the older animals that we used to. I would like to see that reversed, and I think that could happen very quickly. If I was in charge of DNR and didn't have to get anybody's approval for regulation changes, I would have Illinois blowing Iowa away within 3 or 4 years. So I would. One of the first things I would do, though, is I don't think I've got the answers to every situation. One of the first things I would do is bring in a very competent biologist to work with me, and I would lean on him heavy for advice. Someone like Dr. Bronson Strickland, or one of the best, that's managed a statewide herd, is Gary Alt. And I don't know if he's still managing the herd in Pennsylvania or not, but he was at one time. Gary Alt is one of the best deer managers there is, so that would be one thing I would do.
Yes, and you don't give credit to DNRs very often, but I hope they took note to it. You're not always bashing them. You gave them a kudos every now and then.
I try to be fair. If they do great things and they do some good things, I'm more than happy to give them kudos when they deserve it. But I also obviously am not shy about bashing them.
Well, I think the drive or the lobbyist or the leverage that's been done is exactly what you said. It's on deer numbers, and whether that's the auto industry, insurance claims, or the CWD disease, or any of that kind of stuff, the focus has clearly been on deer numbers, not age structure. And every in a lot of states, it's not just Illinois. Every state is worried more about the deer number than they are the age structure within that number. And to some people that doesn't matter, but to people doing what we're trying to do, it's a big deal.
Well, to be fair to the DNR biologist, they've got to work with the politicians. And the politicians tie their hands a lot. And it probably applies to every state. I'm sure there's deer biologists across the country working in different states that are not allowed to do exactly what they want to do.
Right.
I mean, if you think about it, they're doing more management of people than they are the deer herd. They're managing the politicians and the public and, the people they got to answer to. And it's probably a nightmare for them, to be honest.
Balancing how much revenue they're supposed to bring in to the state's budget at the same time.
But, I say the word DNR, and it's a term used very loosely. Our conservation officers, CPOs, conservation police officers in Illinois, they're part of DNR. But, I think they do a fantastic job. I think they're spread too thin. I know my local CPO, I have his phone number in my phone. I can text him a question, which I just did recently about mowing corn. I wanted to verify that it was indeed legal to mow corn and hunt deer over it, and it is. I can text him a question, and within 24 hours, I've got an answer. If he don't know it, he's going to find it. If I have an issue, which I've had with whatever, and had to call the conservation officer for, whatever it might be, they are always very cordial. So I think people get the idea that I hate DNR, and I don't. There's a lot of good people working within DNR, and I recognize that their hands are often tied. It's just the whole system. It's like the whole political system in this country is so corrupt and just out of control. And the DNR is nothing but a government agency. It's got the dirty politics entwined within it, just the same as the FBI, the DOJ, the ATF, whatever three-letter agency you want to throw out there. To some degree, every government agency has some dirty politics that they have to deal with and hoops they got to jump through that they shouldn't. And DNR is no different.
All right. Well, what do you got cooking for this week before we record? Are you traveling any this week?
I am done traveling. We got Brent Henderson coming in on Friday evening for our men's retreat. So Friday and Saturday I'll be there helping out with that. I'm going to check some cameras, see if I can track down that target buck and hope that I get a picture of him. Hope EHD didn't get him. I'll be spending a lot of time doing that. That's probably, I'll be shooting my bow a lot.
Yep.
Moving up to, the closer we get to season, the more I shoot my bow. So I'll be working on that quite a bit as well.
Yep. All right. Well, for all those who listen and supported us, we appreciate it. Make sure you're subscribed and you're watching the YouTube channel, Chasing Giants in TV, or our social media. There's content coming every single day. You did a video on Friday about planting dates of your corn where you saw 3 different planting dates of the same variety perform completely different. And it was very interesting information. But we got Bobby Worthington coming up this week. We got Josh Anderson, Brian Kraft, Chris Yates. Steve Shields did a good one today from his place. So every single day there's going to be something for everybody. We appreciate the support and hope you enjoy it.
Yep. So we'll see you back here next week, everybody. God bless. Have a great week.
Wildlife Farming is the leading e-commerce platform specializing in habitat management equipment. Our mission is to make available the equipment necessary for the development of wildlife habitat and improve conservation for hunting and recreational property. We carry flagship brands like the Genesis Drill and Goliath Roller, as well as the premier brands in planting, mowing, spraying, forestry management, and fencing equipment. Food plot and habitat goals vary. Wildlife Farming is the company that can deliver the equipment to achieve these goals. Equipment is our specialty. Our staff is trained and familiar with all the tractor and skid steer brands to make sure you get the right piece of equipment to get the job done right the first time. At Wildlife Farming, we only sell quality equipment, and we have the support and expertise you need. Please visit wildlifefarming.com for all of your equipment needs.